After Captain Darius Hale left the palace, the halls felt strangely quiet. The guards still stood at attention, the servants still bowed, and the meetings still continued, but for Princess Sarathiel, something had changed. She tried to ignore it at first. She told herself the human was nothing, just a soldier, a servant. Yet every time she walked through the corridors, she found herself glancing toward the empty spot behind her, where he used to stand. The silence that had once annoyed her now felt heavy. In her heart, pride still whispered that she had done nothing wrong. But another voice, softer and deeper, began to question her. One morning, Sarathiel visited the training yard. She watched her royal guards practicing. Their movements were elegant but slow, perfect but predictable. She remembered the human, how he had moved through chaos during the attack on Sarath. There had been no show, no elegance, just purpose. She realized that his strength hadn't come from his armor or weapons. It had come from something else, something she didn't understand yet. Later that day, the High Regent, her father, called her to the council chamber. "Sarathiel," he said, his deep voice calm but firm. "Do you know why humans have grown so fast, even with so little? It is because they believe in something greater than pride. They fight for each other, not for power." She lowered her head slightly. "Father, You insulted a man who saved your life," he interrupted. "Do you think that makes you strong?" "No, daughter. It makes you blind. You judged an entire people because you were afraid to see them as equals." His words cut deep. She wanted to defend herself but couldn't. The memory of Darius walking away in silence burned in her mind. That night she went to the barracks to look for him, but he was gone. The human officers told her he had returned to the frontier to help rebuild the outposts destroyed in the war. "No rank, no pay, just volunteer work. Why would he do that?" she asked a human engineer. The man smiled sadly. "Because that's what he does, Princess. When something breaks, he fixes it. Whether it's a wall, a village, or peace itself." Those words stayed with her weeks past. The Carthian capital grew busy with new trade routes and joint projects. Slowly, the alliance began to strengthen, yet not everyone was happy. Hidden groups of Carthian extremists plotted against the treaty. Believing peace with humans was an insult to their honor. One evening, as Sarathiel was preparing for a diplomatic journey to a nearby moon, her father received a threat. A rebel faction called the Pure Flame had sworn to destroy the royal line for betraying Carthia to human weakness. Her guards doubled their patrols, but Sarathiel refused to cancel her trip. "If I hide, they win," she told her father. "I'll go. But I want to see the frontier myself. I want to see what humans have built." The journey began 2 days later. The transport ship carried her and a team of guards across the silent void toward a colony called Outpost 17, one of the harshest reconstruction zones. When the ship landed, the colony looked rough, but alive. Humans worked side by side with Carthians, repairing damaged power lines and building shelters. The air was dusty, the wind cold. It wasn't a palace, it was survival. As Sarathiel stepped out, her eyes fell on a familiar figure in the distance. A man in a worn undersuit, sleeves rolled up, helping to lift heavy metal beams with a group of workers. No armor, no rank insignia, just Darius. For a moment she couldn't move. He turned and saw her. Surprise flickered in his eyes, but he didn't salute.
He didn't even bow.
He simply nodded politely and went back to work. Sarathiel walked toward him. "Captain Hale," she began softly. "I'm not a captain anymore," he said without looking up. She hesitated. "Then Darius," he kept working, his voice calm. "Why are you here, Princess? I thought you had enough of humans." She wanted to say many things, but the words didn't come easily. "I came to see what you're building," she said finally. He placed a beam down and looked at her. "We're building hope. Doesn't look like much yet, but it's a start." She stared at the dusty settlement around them, humans and Carthians eating together, laughing, working in the cold. "It was messy, imperfect, but real. I didn't think your kind could live like this," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "That's the thing about humans, Princess. We don't wait for things to be perfect. We make them better." She fell silent. For the rest of the day, she watched them work. No one treated her like royalty. They handed her tools, asked her to help, and expected her to carry her weight. At first she was offended, but soon she found herself joining them. She held cables, moved equipment, and even laughed once when a worker accidentally spilled oil on her boots. It was strange. For the first time, she felt like part of something real. That night, Darius sat by a campfire with the workers. Sarathiel approached quietly and sat across from him. The firelight reflected on his calm face. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. He looked up, surprised. "I was cruel to you," she continued. "I thought being proud made me strong. But you showed me that real strength is something else. You saved me and I repaid you with insults. I was wrong." Darius watched her for a long moment. "Apologies are easy, Princess," he said softly. "Change is harder." "I want to change," she said. "I want to understand your kind. You fight without arrogance. You care without expecting reward. My people don't understand that." He nodded slightly. "Maybe one day they will." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. For the first time, Sarathiel didn't feel superior or ashamed, just human in her own way. The peace didn't last long. At dawn, the alarm siren screamed across the outpost. Rebel ships were approaching, pure flame forces armed and ready. They must have followed her transport, waiting for the perfect time to strike. "Everyone to positions," Darius shouted. He turned to Sarathiel. "You need to get to the bunker." "No," she said firmly. "I won't run again. This isn't about pride." He snapped. "It's about survival." "I'm staying," she said. Her voice was steady this time. There was no time to argue. Plasma fire rained down from the sky as the rebels landed. Humans and loyal Carthians rushed to defend the colony. The air was filled with smoke and chaos, just like before. Darius fought on the front lines, rifle in hand, moving with the same calm precision. Sarathiel stayed behind him, helping wounded soldiers and relaying orders through the comms. For hours they fought side by side. Then, during a moment of quiet, a blast struck the generator building near them. The structure began to collapse. Darius shoved Sarathiel out of the way, taking the brunt of the debris. "Darius!" she screamed, rushing to him. His leg was pinned under metal and sparks crackled around them. He grimaced. "You need to go, Princess." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't leave you again!" She tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. Finally, a group of human workers arrived and helped her pull it free. Together, they dragged Darius to safety. As the battle raged, Sarathiel picked up his dropped rifle and fired at the advancing rebels. The weapon kicked hard, but she didn't stop. For the first time in her life, she fought, not as a princess, but as a soldier. When the last of the rebels were defeated, the colony lay in ruins, but it had survived. Humans and Carthians cheered together, exhausted but alive. Sarathiel knelt beside Darius as medics treated his wounds. His armor was gone again, shattered and burned, yet he smiled faintly. "You did well, Princess," he whispered. She took his hand. "No, we did well." He looked at her, and for the first time since the palace, she saw warmth in his eyes. Days later, the High Regent himself arrived to see the rebuilt outpost and hear what had happened. He stood before the gathered soldiers, both human and Carthian, and said, "Today, the future of our alliance was tested, and it survived because of those who chose honor over pride." He turned to his daughter. "Sarathiel, what have you learned?" She looked at Darius, who was now walking with a cane but still standing tall. "I learned that humans are not weak," she said. "They are strong because they believe in others. They build, they protect, they forgive. And I hope one day we Carthians can be the same." The crowd cheered softly. Later, as the sun set over the damaged but living colony, Sarathiel stood beside Darius once more. "Will you return to the palace now?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, there's still work to do here." She smiled gently. "Then I'll stay too." He looked at her, surprised. "You?" "Yes," she said. "If humans can rebuild from ashes, maybe I can too." For the first time since the war began, Darius smiled. A real quiet smile. "Then welcome to the frontier, Princess." And as the stars rose above the broken world, two once enemies stood side by side, not as warrior and princess, not as alien and human, but as equals. The war between humans and the Carthian Empire had ended only a few months ago. It was a brutal 7-year conflict that left both sides broken. The humans had fought harder than anyone expected, surprising the galaxy with their strength and stubbornness. The Carthians were proud, powerful aliens who ruled many planets, and they had never seen a species so unwilling to bow. Now the war was over. Peace talks had begun, and as part of the treaty, the Carthians invited a group of human officers to help rebuild what had been destroyed. Among them was Captain Darius Hale, a human soldier known for his calm, discipline, and unshakable honor. He was assigned to guard a royal envoy, a young Carthian princess named Sarathiel Vora. She was the daughter of the High Regent himself, a symbol of Carthian pride. She was tall, elegant, and sharp-tongued, her skin like pale silver and her eyes bright blue with pride. She hated humans. Everyone knew that, but her father insisted she work with them as a sign of peace. When Darius arrived at the royal palace, the first thing he noticed was how cold everything felt. Not just the marble floors or the silver walls, but the people themselves. Every Carthian who looked at him did so with quiet disdain. To them, humans were wild and inferior. They respected human bravery in war, but still saw them as less. Darius didn't care. He was there to do his job. Princess Sarathiel entered the hall with her guards following. She looked at Darius and frowned slightly as though the sight of him offended her. "So this is the human warrior they've sent to guard me?" she said, her tone sharp. "I expected someone taller, or at least more impressive." Darius bowed slightly. "Captain Darius Hale, at your service, Your Highness." "I did not ask for your service," she replied coldly. "I do not need protection from your kind." "I understand," Darius said calmly. "Still, it is my duty." Sarathiel turned away, waving her hand as if brushing away a fly. "Fine. Stay out of my way, human." From that day, Darius followed her everywhere, through royal meetings, colony visits, and long trips across the scarred Carthian planets. He kept silent, watching, always alert. The princess often insulted him in small ways, calling him slow, crude, or ignorant of civilized manners. But he never reacted. He didn't fight back or raise his voice. His calmness seemed to irritate her even more. To the other humans, she was unbearable. But to Darius, she was simply a young ruler who didn't understand the value of humility. He saw that behind her arrogance was fear, a fear of losing the glory her people once had. One afternoon, their convoy landed on the icy moon of Sareth to visit a rebuilding site. Human engineers worked there alongside Carthian workers. The place was filled with noise. Machines grinding, people shouting instructions, sparks flying through the cold air. Sarathiel stepped out of the transport and wrinkled her nose. "Look at them," she said, "covered in dirt and sweat. Humans always find comfort in chaos." Darius said nothing. He walked beside her, scanning the perimeter. The area wasn't fully secure. There were reports of rebel activity, Carthians who refused to accept peace with humans. She continued, her voice loud enough for others to hear. "You humans think war made you equal to us, but it only showed how desperate you are. You fight because you have nothing else." Darius finally looked at her. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But sometimes those who have nothing left to lose fight the hardest." Sarathiel frowned, but before she could reply, an explosion tore through the far side of the site. A blinding flash of light threw workers to the ground. The shockwave hit them hard and alarms blared all around. "Get down!" Darius shouted, pulling the princess behind a pile of metal crates. Plasma bolts started flying. Rebels had arrived, Carthians wearing dark armor, their weapons aimed at the princess's escort. The royal guards tried to form a shield around her, but they were caught off guard. Within seconds, 2 of them fell, their armor glowing red from the plasma shots. Darius reacted instantly, moving faster than anyone else. He pulled the princess into cover and drew his rifle. "Stay down, Your Highness," he ordered. Sarathiel was shaking. She had seen war from afar, but not like this. Not close, not with the heat of plasma and the smell of smoke filling the air. Darius fired with precision, each shot clean and controlled. He moved through the smoke, covering the wounded guards and dragging them back to safety. His movements were smooth, practiced without fear. When one rebel tried to sneak around, Darius met him head-on, slamming him to the ground and disarming him in a blur. The firefight lasted minutes that felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, the rebels were either dead or retreating. The site was in ruins, but most of the workers had survived because of the human soldier who refused to retreat. Darius walked back toward the princess, his armor scratched and smoking, his face calm as ever. "You're safe now," he said. Sarathiel stared at him, unable to speak. For the first time, she saw not a servant, but a protector. He had risked his life without hesitation, not for glory, but because it was right. "Why? Why did you do that?" she finally asked. "You could have died. That's what soldiers do, princess," he said simply. "We protect, even those who hate us." His words stayed in her mind for days. She didn't admit it, but she began to watch him differently. When he stood guard at her side, she noticed the patience in his eyes, the quiet strength in his silence. He didn't seek praise. He didn't boast. He just did what needed to be done. Still, pride is a powerful thing, and hers would not bend easily. A week later, a meeting was held in the royal chamber. Human officers and Carthian nobles gathered to discuss new trade routes and reconstruction plans. Darius stood behind the princess as usual, silent and unmoving. The hall was filled with tension. Some nobles whispered that humans were too greedy. Others said they couldn't be trusted. Sarathiel rose to speak. "My father believes this alliance will last," she said, "but I still question it. Humans claim to be loyal, but they serve only when paid. They fight only when ordered. Their courage is conditional." Murmurs filled the room. Several human officers looked down, embarrassed or angry. Darius didn't move. He stood like a statue behind her. Then Sarathiel turned, her voice sharp and cold. "Even now this human stands behind me as if he were my equal. He is not. He is a guard, nothing more. Take off your armor, Captain. Let everyone see the fragile creature hiding beneath it." The hall went silent. Everyone stared at Darius. For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly, he reached up and unlatched the chest plate of his armor. The metallic click echoed in the vast chamber. He removed one piece after another, the shoulder guards, the gauntlets, the helmet, until all that remained was the black undersuit clinging to his frame. He stood tall, calm, and unarmed. His face was tired but proud. "You're right, Princess," he said softly. "I don't need armor to know who I am." Then he turned toward his commanding officer. "I resign my post." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Sarathiel froze, her breath caught in her throat. Darius gave a final respectful bow and walked out of the room, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent hall. No one spoke for a long time. The princess tried to act indifferent, but something in her chest ached. She had seen many warriors in her life, strong, arrogant, loud, but none who could walk away with such quiet dignity. Later that night, she stood by the balcony of her tower, looking out at the twin moons above the city. The wind was cold against her face, but her thoughts were restless. She could still see Darius's eyes when he spoke, steady, calm, filled with something she couldn't understand. Honor. She whispered the word to herself. Carthians always claimed to live by it, but she realized now that humans understood it in ways her people didn't. To her, honor had always meant status and pride. To him, it meant doing what was right even when no one saw, even when it cost him everything. For the first time in her life, Sarathiel felt small, and for the first time, she missed the presence of the human who had always stood silently behind her.